All right, I'm actually super excited for today's conversation because we're going to be talking all about fluoride. We're going to go over the history of fluoride in the drinking water, why we did that, what are the benefits of fluoride, how does it work in the body, what are some of the negative side effects of having too much fluoride circulating in the body, and then how we can kind of parse through this debate to figure out what the best strategy is for you and your family to take care of your health. So fluoride is, as I'm sure you know, a very heated discussion in the United States right now. At the time of this recording in 2024, there's actually two lawsuits going on in separate parts of the country, completely opposite each other. So in California, people who came together and they actually sued the California government, saying that they were putting fluoride in the drinking water and that was causing negative effects and harm for their children. And all the way on the other side of the country in Buffalo, New York, there's a separate lawsuit going on. People, same thing, suing the government because they didn't put enough fluoride or didn't put any fluoride at all in the drinking water. And now their kids have impaired dental health as a result of that. So we can see there's two very polarizing arguments going on. And both of these cases are currently open against these governments. So today we want to kind of discuss a little bit about where this fluoride in the drinking water came from, why we do it to begin with, what are the benefits, risks, and then what you can do to make the best decisions for your family. So let's dive into it here. So putting fluoride in our drinking water has been a practice that's actually been around since 1945. The first city in the United States, or in the world actually, to put fluoride in their drinking water was Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so this study was opened up by the government and then taken over by the National Institute of Dental Health when that was incepted. And what they found was that the school children in Grand Rapids, where they had been adding fluoride to the water, had significantly less cavities and better oral health. And so within 5 years of the study starting, they started rolling out these fluoridated water programs all across the country because of the benefits of dental health. Fast forward 75 or 80 years, we can see we're in a position now where we've been almost everywhere in the United States. Now, not everywhere, but most places in the United States do actually have fluoride in the water. And we've got potentially some other side effects or things that have happened as a result of that. So in order to understand why that may be happening, let's first discuss the benefits. All right, so let's talk about why fluoride is actually good for us. So dentists pretty much across the board will tell you that fluoride has a very beneficial effect within the mouth. And what that does is it actually helps to strengthen the enamel of our teeth. So our teeth have an outer hard layer of enamel that's very protective. It's lucent. You can see kind of through it. It's opaque to the inner dentin layer of the teeth. And so we need to have hard mineralization or enamel on the outside of our teeth if we want to have proper tooth health. And so our teeth are always in a state of either mineralizing or building up that enamel layer or of breaking down that enamel layer. One of the biggest things that controls this is the acidic environment within the mouth and having adequate amounts of those really important minerals and nutrients within the body. Now, that mineralization process takes place by minerals forming what are called hydroxyapatite crystal structures. So that hydroxyapatite crystallization within the teeth is what gives it that very strong enamel exterior. What fluoride basically does within the mouth is it goes in areas where there's weak enamel structure and it actually replaces that hydroxyapatite bond with a different bond. And if we look at this through a microscope, the bond is not the same as that hydroxyapatite bond that we are supposed to have. It's actually stronger. And so there's pretty much no denying that from a mechanistic standpoint, we know that fluoride creates a stronger enamel bond within the mouth. The problem is that what other kind of negative impacts does that potentially have within the body? Now, that Grand Rapids study that they did in 1945, the CDC to this day claims that fluoridating the water is one of the biggest public health successes of all time because of the dental health and the reduction in cavities within our body. And so while that may be the case, and it's very good, of course, to protect our mouth and our teeth, do we need to have fluoride in the water in order to do that? Are there other things that we can do to protect our mouth? And what are some of the potential negative side effects of having fluoride? So before we talk about some of the other things that we can do to protect our mouth and our teeth outside of fluoridating our water and our toothpaste and things like that, let's discuss kind of what some of the negative effects of fluoride in our drinking water are. So there's two main areas in our body that fluoride is going to have the biggest negative impact, and that's going to be our thyroid and our brain. So in order to understand how fluoride affects the thyroid, we first have to understand a little bit about how the thyroid produces hormone. So So I've got a couple other videos where I talk in a lot more depth on how thyroid hormone is produced within the body and things like that. The biggest things that we need to understand for the sake of this argument is that thyroid hormone is made of two things essentially. So tyrosine, which is what the T stands for in things like T4 and T3, and iodine, which is what the number stands for. So a T4 hormone is 2 tyrosine molecules bound with 4 iodine molecules. T3 hormone is 2 tyrosine molecules bound with 3 iodine molecules. Very important to understand that we have to have tyrosine bound to iodine. Tyrosine bound to anything else does not create a usable thyroid hormone. So if we go all the way back to our chemistry classes in high school, you probably remember the periodic table of elements. Some of you may have terrible flashbacks to the periodic table of elements, but if you look over on the right side, there's a column right there called our halogens. And that group on the periodic table consists of things like iodine. It also contains bromine, chlorine, and fluorine. And so what we see when we look at that, if you had a picture of that periodic table of elements, you'd see that iodine is actually below chloride, fluoride, and bromide. And so what that means is that when those other substances or metals are present in higher amounts within the body, it's actually going to have a preferential binding to tyrosine over iodine. And so what this means is that if we have a lot of fluoride circulating around within the body, it can actually push out those iodine molecules and bind fluoride to tyrosine instead of iodine. The problem is that now we've created a thyroid hormone that doesn't work, right? And so we've decreased our overall production of thyroid because we've competitively inhibited iodine from binding to tyrosine. This is a big issue, right? And while we can't look at this and say fluoride caused the problem, what we can look at are kind of some overall themes, right? So we've been fluoridating our water since 1945. I just looked up the stats for 2023. Levothyroxine was the #1 prescribed medication and filled script within the United States. Levothyroxine is a synthetic version of T4. So we've got almost the entire country drinking fluoridated drinking water, and the most commonly prescribed medication in the United States is a synthetic version of T4, which we are going to reduce production of within the body if we have too high of levels of fluoride. Now, am I saying cause and effect? No, we're definitely not saying cause and effect. But if we want to have the best chance of being able to produce thyroid hormone, we've got to make sure we don't have other things going on that are affecting our ability to produce that. So we've got to have enough iodine. We've also got to make sure that things like chloride, bromide, and fluoride aren't also circulating in high enough levels to block that out. Now, I mentioned 2 other things. Today we're talking about fluoride. We're not going to get into the chlorine and bromine argument here, but those 2 things are also very heavily prevalent, also in drinking water, in swimming pools. A lot of people using bromine in hot tubs instead of chlorine because they don't want all the chlorine exposure. Bromine's also in fire retardants, brominated flour and bread, as a dough conditioner. So it's not that we're getting fluoride and fluoride's causing all the problems. It's that fluoride is one of a bunch of things that are all summing up together to create a big negative effect. And so it's really just important to understand that the toxic load that's causing all these problems is not one thing, it's a bunch of things. So when we talk on this podcast about things that we can do to improve our overall health, we may focus in on one very specific thing for the sake of a single point or topic, but it doesn't mean that that's the only thing. So all of these things that we're doing are just strategies that you can do to maximize your chance of having as close to normal a function as possible. So we talked about a little bit how too high of fluoride is going to have competitive inhibition for binding sites of tyrosine with iodine. So it can decrease our ability to produce thyroid hormone by interfering with the ability to bind iodine. So we know that from a physiological biochemical process, that's what happens, right? So if we look at some of the other things, fluoride is also a neurotoxin. It's a poison. In high enough levels, it can be a poison. Now, we're not getting poisonous levels or poisonous doses in our drinking water, hopefully. Some counties have higher levels of fluoride than other counties, but by and large, we're well below the toxic or lethal dose of fluoride. The problem is that lethal doses are assumed in one single serving, right? It's not the cumulative dose that's absorbed within your body over 20 years. And again, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the neurotoxic effects of fluoride. And it's difficult to say what the neurotoxic effects of fluoride are. It's been heavily linked in animal studies to attention issues, learning issues, growth issues in newborns where the mother was exposed to high levels of fluoride during pregnancy. We don't have the clinical data in human trials yet, so it's hard to say how that affects humans. But if it happens in animal studies, there's a decent chance that it could still have a negative effect in human studies, right? And again, that comes back to, do you want to be a test subject and a guinea pig? And my whole goal with this podcast is to help you have all the information that you need to make informed decisions about your own health. I'm not telling you what to do either way. I'm not telling you there's a ton of research showing that fluoride affects neurotoxicity in children. But if we can start to draw some conclusions here from other sources, we can make better decisions, and then you can decide if you want to be the guinea pig for that study, right? So one of the proposed mechanisms is that fluoride decreases mitochondrial function. It affects the DNA. It affects the metabolism of the cells. And if cells aren't metabolizing appropriately, they don't have energy, they're not going to function as well. So we know that there are some mechanisms that explain why fluoride has neurotoxic effects. We just don't quite know what the exact mechanism is in humans. And again, I personally don't want to be a guinea pig, which is why I filter fluorine out of my water, why I drink spring water, reverse osmosis water, things like that don't have all the chemicals in it from the government. Okay, so we talked about some of the neurotoxic effects, some of the thyroid effects. We know fluoride is very good for our mouth. So now how do we weigh the two? So there's a couple different camps of people who are, all I care about is the dental stuff. I know my teeth are stronger. We don't know about all of this. I'm just going to choose to drink the fluoride water. Totally fine. There's people who are like, oh shoot, now what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to make a decision with all this information? And then there's the people who are, I hate fluoride, I don't care about the dental stuff, I'm just not going to have it anywhere, right? So for the people who are kind of on the fence about this, let's try to figure out some strategies that we can do so we can still have good healthy teeth and also not have any of those other negative side effects. So first place that this starts is understanding how cavities form within the mouth in the first place. And cavities, for the most part, are linked to a certain bacterial strain in your mouth called Streptococcus mutans, or strep mutans. And what strep mutans does is it feeds on sugar coming into the mouth, and it produces a lot of acids, and those acids will break down that enamel coating. Now remember, the enamel in our teeth is always in a state of remineralization or demineralization. So just because cavities have started to form, the enamel has started to weaken, doesn't mean it can't strengthen up on its own. Unless it's broken through into that dentin layer, chances are you can remineralize your teeth as long as we get out of the environment that's causing the breakdown to begin with. So if we understand that it's the acids produced by the strep mutans bacteria in the mouth that are weakening that enamel layer, what can we do to help that? Well, number one, they feed on sugar. That sugar comes into your mouth through your diet. You have 100% control over your diet. Getting sugar out of your diet is very important. This is why they say high sugar diets can feed into that bacteria. They can create cavities because they're going to feed the strep mutans to produce more acid. So get the sugar out of your diet. The other thing that we can do is to help control the population of strep mutans. If we don't have as much, it's not going to have as negative of an impact, right? So what can we do to decrease the levels of strep mutans in the mouth? Number one is xylitol, and probably the most important. Xylitol has been extensively studied. We know that what happens when you consume xylitol, which is an artificial, or not an artificial sweetener, it's a natural, non-nutritive sweetener. What happens when we consume xylitol is that xylitol is going to be preferentially eaten up by those strep mutans bacteria, which means they're not going to go for the sugar, they're going to go for the xylitol. And that xylitol can actually help to kill the strep mutans bacteria, and it prevents them from producing those harmful acids. So if we want to move from a demineralization stage into remineralization, we've got to get rid of the bacteria that are producing the acid, right? And then we've got to make sure that we're eating all the nutrients and minerals and stuff that we need in order to produce healthy teeth. And so Celtic sea salt, Himalayan sea salt is going to have all those nutrients. So getting that type of salt in your diet, making sure you're getting all those trace nutrients and minerals in your diet, very important. Get rid of the bacteria, increasing xylitol, things like that. Now xylitol you can get from xylitol gums, suckers, sweeteners, mints, things like that. So look for those xylitol-based mints. The other thing that's very important is having saliva production, right? So xylitol mints will help to increase salivary production. One of the times that we have the least amount of salivary production is actually overnight. So doing xylitol mints and things like that at night before bed to help increase that saliva production can also be very important. So there are a lot of strategies that we can start to take to improve the health of the mouth outside of just drinking fluoride. And if we do things as simple as decreasing sugar in our diet, increasing xylitol in the form of mints, suckers, or gum, we can have a positive effect on dental health without the potential negative side effects of all the other things. So let's talk about if you're in a place that has fluoride in your tap water. How can we eliminate the fluoride? The best form of fluoride elimination is going to come from reverse osmosis water. So we don't necessarily need to put a huge whole house water filtration unit on the house. That can get very pricey. We need to focus heavily on the water that we're consuming. So in our house, what this means is that we have a reverse osmosis filter under our sink, meaning the water that we drink and the water that we cook with is going to have that fluoride removed from it. The specific type that we have has a remineralization filter on it because reverse osmosis does pull a lot of those nutrients and minerals out of the water. So ours has a remineralization stage, puts all the good stuff back in, but pulls all the bad stuff out. So we're making sure that the water that we're drinking does not have that. Distilled water, spring water, things like that from the grocery store, all also going to be very good alternatives. What we don't want to do is be drinking just straight faucet tap water. So that's the biggest thing. So again, I hope you guys have a better understanding of how fluoride affects the body in both a positive and a negative way, and some of the steps that you can take to help prevent dental issues while still preventing the negative effects of fluoride within your body. So as always, my goal and my mission is to help you make the best decisions for your own health. Make sure that you're armed with all the tools and the resources that you need to make an informed decision when it comes to your health and the health of your family member and loved ones. So like always, drop comments below. I'd love to make videos about things that you guys want to learn about, and I'd love to answer any other questions that you have. And until next time, hit like, hit subscribe, and stay tuned for more.